got some clean fleece here and I'm running it through the drum carder to make some socks, and I often get asked how I prepare my fleece. So I've just washed this in the kitchen sink, given it 2 or 3 rinses till it ran relatively clear. Some washing up liquid in the process as well. And then let it dry. I've actually let it dry for a few days because I didn't put it in the washing machine to spin it. I couldn't find a little sock laundry bag or something to put it in. So I just let it drip dry basically without touching it too much. There's lots of short bits in here, so I won't actually put that through the drum carder because the liquor should just pick it up, and if it doesn't, it'll become a little knobbly bit in your spinning. But the longer bits I will, and what you often do is you pull the tips off. I know this is the correct way to do it, is you pull the tips off because they're brown, and that's also a short bit. It's a lengthy processing fleece. It is a process by all means of the definition of the word. But there are some lovely bits in this fleece, and this fleece is a clean from my friend's farm. A very high welfare sheep, fed a really good diet. I really like it to spin. This is basically how I prep it for going in the carder. Now, I know some people, rather than pulling the tips off, like this, they will put hand carder on their knee and they will just flick it with the carder. Now, I don't know where my other hand carder is, it's somewhere, but you can just do it and hold it. And it does look quite nice. It goes nice and fluffy. And then you might say, well, if you're hand carding it, why are you bothering to put it through the drum carder? Well, the reason I want to put it through the drum carder is it's a clean fleece. So what I actually want to do is give it some additional strength for the sock. I'm also going to blend it with a colour, and I do find that when you've ran something through a drum carder, it spins really easily. However you want it, whether you want it thick or you want it thin. I'm not a lace spinner, so I can't comment on lace thinners, but I find I like how it prepares the fleece. You can spin straight from the fleece itself, but you probably would have to go through all these bits and take the end off, otherwise you're going to get very hard bits in there. It's much quicker. You've got a bit of wastage there, you could run that through as well. It's much quicker just throwing through a drum carder. And then pull the odd one out that you miss. And then, I know a lot of people like to spin roll legs. You can make roll legs off your drum carder. They're referred to as faux legs. But then I don't think there's any difference in spinning a faux leg to a roll leg, other than the roll leg off your hand carders has taken a lot longer to make. So I'm going to now run this through carder, like so. As you can see, not much has got caught in the liquor because I've removed all the small parts, and I just can keep adding and adding and adding. So this drum carder is one from Classic Carder by Britton, and they can carry about 150 grams of fluff, fibre. In fact, I've actually probably got more on it, to be honest, than 150 grams. But it's really nice. But as you can see, I've been taking away at this fleece every spare 10 minutes I've got. I'm nowhere near through it, and it isn't the whole fleece either. This is just a section I grabbed a couple of days ago to have enough for some socks. whilst being here, I've also realised it's show season, and I haven't booked any shows this year. I haven't booked any more shows, which is bad on my part. I think the only show I've booked isn't a wall show, it's a craft show, and it's a Craft for Crafters in Exeter at the end of March. What we normally do is we normally run classes at somewhere like Craft for Crafters. They're very good. They've got all types of craft there, not just wall craft. There's paper craft, there's sewing, there's needle craft, resin making. But I don't have any ideas to what to run as a class. I haven't a clue. Haven't a clue. Because it's not just the woolly community that come. Although thousands of people do come through the door, probably not as many as coming through the door just post-COVID, or even pre-COVID. But yeah, if anyone has any ideas what class I could run, drop it in the box below. I know some people might say, what about preparing a fleece? I could do that as a class. I could probably only teach one person at a time, or 2 people at most, because I only have 2 drum carders. I don't have a whole row of drum carders. Oh look, that's a 5 washing little bug of some description. Yeah, I only have 2 drum carders, so I could probably teach 1 or 2 people at a time. And we also can't wash any fleece because we don't have access to scorching hot water. So I'd have to bring the fleece already washed. And I think washing is probably one of the questions I get asked the most. How do you wash a fleece? And when I started to wash fleece, it was also one of the questions I asked everybody who I knew spun fleece. Because everyone has their own way to do it. And what I realised is there is no wrong way to do it. The only wrong way is to agitate it. So whatever you're washing, don't try and separate it in the sink whilst the water is hot. Do that before, pull out the vegetable matter and just let it sit. Let it sit in its own hot water, empty it, fill it back up again. Empty it, fill it back up again. I've even boiled it in a pan on the cooker without agitating the fleece. And when I was actually keeping it constantly at temperature and boiling it in the pan, it only took 3 rinses as opposed to say like 4 or 5 when the water's cooling down in the sink. Although this has actually done quite a good job. Now, if I was being really fussy, I probably wouldn't run this through the drum carder, but given it's going to be socks, I'm not going to be too fussy. It's not, these aren't particularly great pieces I've pulled off this time, but they will do. I'm going to blend it with a bit of merino, some nylon sparkle, I think. And then nylon sparkle, although it's plastic, and I really don't like plastic, it will give it a little bit of strength. That's particularly short over there. As you can see, I'm not putting a lot on here to go through the drum carder. You should really, so it doesn't get stuck in your carder, be able to see through the fibre or the fleece that you're putting on. I do see people sometimes on social media packing this out, and it's quite thick, and then they're really putting some force behind the handle to get the drum moving. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't have to do it either. I think it's unnecessary, because if you want that unblended look, you can just attach it straight to the drum if you want it a bit less blended. But also you will compromise the longevity of your drum carder. You'll just compromise all of it. You'll compromise your handle. You might even snap your handle. You'll compromise, I don't know what these are called, but you could break one of those. And you also damage the pins, which is the most important part, is this carding cloth. You'll bend the pins on your carding cloth. So I really strongly recommend forcing your drum carder to turn, because you put so much fibre on the plate, like you're trying to feed it way too much. And I think it's a little bit of impatience, because you want to do it quickly. If you want to do that quickly, go buy an electric drum carder. You can't feed it that much either, but it does mean, because it's constantly turning, you don't have to crank the handle. So it does make it a bit quicker. You can put more on than that. You can fill this box, but you should always be able to see through your fibre. A lot of vegetable matter now in this bit. I don't know what part of the fleece this was, because I just went in the shed and grabbed a clump from a fleece that was rolled up. I thought, I'll wash that tonight. I'll card it tomorrow. And here I am, 4 days later, still carding it. See, there's lots of breaks in the fleece here, and your breaks in the fleece can, see, that's a nice piece, but then next to it it can be a second cut from the shearer, or it can be where the sheep has been ill. It's had a cold or something, there's a break in the fibre. So a lot of people will just pull off the lock like that. There's when I wash Shetland, I find Shetland, when I wash it, felts very easily. I will pull it off whilst it's dirty, lock by lock, and then I will flick it in some washing up liquid to wash it. It's long and it's quick all at the same time, because you're washing the individual locks, but it does mean you don't get any little bits like this, and you can also see how good your fleece is before you card it. And it means you can put all your locks in the same way. You're really being really picky about your fleece. It doesn't mean the rest will go to waste. The rest here that I'm discarding will be felted. It'll be felted onto the back of something, or be core for a felting project. There's lots of things they can be used for. I've actually got a bit of a gap under my windowsill in my bathroom. My windowsill I can lift off, and I need to pack it with some insulation just around the edge. So I might actually put the fleece in there that I won't use. It won't fall, and it will naturally be water resistant, although less so now I've washed it. There's no water in the cavity anyway. So yeah, you can pick it lock by lock, one by one. Card away. When I was starting to spin fleece, I found there weren't a huge amount of resources online of just watching somebody prep it to go through the drum card, or hand prep it. Lots of videos of, here's how I wash my fleece for the first time, and that's not really what I wanted to watch, because I was experimenting myself. I could have watched myself wash a fleece for the first time. But where I've learned a lot of this is I've bought a few really good books, and also went to my guild and asked everyone how they wash their fleece. And so I thought I would just film this video, chat nonsense as I went along, in case there's someone else out there like me thinking, I just want to watch someone prep the fleece because I don't know how to do it in real time. I don't want it sped up, and I don't want to see it in a pan. So yeah, hopefully this has been helpful. And unfortunately I've got a cold, so you might also hear my sniffles. Yeah, hopefully this is helpful to somebody. And maybe this time next year I'll have carded the fleece. But the joy is sometimes in the process as opposed to the spinning of it. There's a lot of people that just really like the end-to-end process, and they're project spinners. I'm becoming more and more of a project spinner, whereas before I just used to see a fleece and want to card it and spin it, but I didn't know what it was going to be. And now I'm more prepping for purpose, let's call it. Prepping for purpose. So these are going to be some socks. Like I said, my mum has requested some socks from me. I actually knitted them for myself. It was a pattern. I kind of just wrote on the hoof, pardon the pun, wrote the pattern on the hoof because I wanted some chunky socks, and I couldn't find a pattern that kind of aligned well with the weight of yarn that I'd spun, because I hadn't really measured how thick I was spinning it or how much I had. So I just kind of guessed it as I went down, and they actually came out really well, so I wrote it down. I've been trying to upload to the website, but having complete technological failure, and I don't know why. I can't seem to work out how to do it because it's a digital item rather than a physical item. But they turned out really nice. They had a nice little blend of silk in. So she wants a pair. And they take maybe 2 evenings at most to knit. A fast knitter would probably knit them both in an evening because they're relatively chunky. I'd say they are a chunky weight. A chunky weight yarn. Knitted on 6mm needles. But they're also not too thick that you can't get them in a boot or a shoe. I wear mine all the time, but in my trainers. And then some people think that socks should be knitted with superwash merino. I strongly contest this, and that we shouldn't try and knit them in a local British breed if possible, because if you think about where merino is from, it's not from England. They're used to warm climates, so superwash merino does not keep your feet warm. Secondly, our local breed sheets are designed for the British climate, so they are designed to keep the sheep warm, so they will keep our feet warm, albeit with a bit less lanolin in them because they've been washed now. But also, what most consumers aren't aware of is that during the process of making a wool superwash, it undergoes either a chemical bath process or is coated. And both those processes are really destructive to the fleece itself, the scales in the fleece. So a fleece is very much like our hair. It has scales, they get damaged. So what they do in these chemical processes, they open up the scales of the fleece, they damage it, and they try and smooth it back over. So when they do this, it's incredibly harmful for the environment, but also renders the wool nowhere near as nice as it is in its original form. Yes, you can put it in the washing machine, but that's because you've destroyed the core fundamental part of that fibre that makes it so special in order to put it in the washing machine. And you can wash non-superwash items if you have a lovely gentle washing machine on a wool setting and you don't spin it to death afterwards. But during that chemical bath process, yeah, it's horrendous for the environment. The alternative is the plastic coating. But why are we coating such a wonderful fibre in plastic for convenience? I mean, a lot of knitters knit because we want to knit with wool. We like the natural product. For me, if you're going to knit with superwash merino, because it's coated in plastic or it's been through a chemical dye bath, you may as well go and buy acrylic, which will definitely not shrink or felt in your washing machine, but is no worse to the environment really than superwash wool. Superwash wool is incredibly bad for the environment, as is acrylic yarn. But when you start to knit, you don't want to start buying, you know, £20-30 worth of very expensive yarn when you don't know what you're doing with it, you're just knitting squares. I think most of us start off knitting with cheap wool and then we go, oh, there must be something nicer than this. But also with the superwash wool, the first time you wear it, before it's been washed, will be the nicest it ever looks. And I think that's really sad, because often you pay quite a lot of money for superwash wool. I know in the hand-dyed wool arena you will pay £16, £17, £18 a skein, sometimes even more. And the first time you wash that, because it has lost its natural scaly properties, those scales have been damaged. Although you can wash it, it will start to lose its shape, because the scales have memory. It has a shape memory. And that's why something like a Shetland jumper that hasn't been through the superwash process will retain its shape for 20 years. A pair of merino socks may start, well, they will lose their shape. Although you've knitted them into shape, the actual fibres themselves, because the scales have been damaged, will lose their shape. And if they have had the chemical plastic process, that plastic will start to come off over time, and you're left with quite a raw, damaged ingredient underneath, which you will get holes in and also won't hold its shape. But worst of all those microplastics are going into your washing machine. Now, if you're like me, you might have a septic tank. You might not want microplastics in your septic tank. It will mean you have to have your septic tank emptied more often. But also they're going into our mains water supply. And there's a lot in the news at the moment about microplastics in our water supply and microplastics in our drinking water. And they're coming from man-made fabrics and man-made processes. So I do think that hand washing the odd pair of socks is worth it for the longevity you get out of them in return. It's a trade-off, isn't it? That you can spend 5 minutes washing your hand knitted socks with non-superwash wool, and you can wash them all together. You don't even have to rinse them with some of the washing products that have come out. You just soak them for 10 minutes, squeeze them out and let them dry, rather than pollute the world with more microplastics. So this is non-superwash merino. I don't actually buy superwash wool. Now, the downside of the downside of a non-superwash wool, other than having to wash it, is it doesn't quite take dye as vibrantly as a superwash. And that's because it's harder for the dye to penetrate the scales, because the scales haven't been so harshly damaged. And that's what allows the superwash wool to take dye beautifully, is that they've opened the scales, they're damaged, so it absorbs a lot of the dye and very quickly, so it's quicker to dye as well. And you don't get that with a non-superwash wool, particularly merino. Merino probably dyes best out of them all. It takes a bit more patience to dye a non-superwash wool. But I think the patience is worth it for the longevity. It'll be interesting to see how much wool I can pull off here. Anyway, that's my 2 pence worth on fibreart fleece and superwash wool, and why, despite the hard work, I think the non-superwash is worth it. You'll also find non-superwash wool is cheaper than superwash, because obviously the chemical dye process the chemical stripping process is quite expensive. I think I have seen a company that have brought out a process of a halfway house between a superwash and a non-superwash, in that it absorbs dye as well as it can without the harsh chemical process of destroying the scales. I don't know what process it's going through, other than it's more of an enzyme process. So they're probably opening the scales with an enzyme as opposed to harsh, environmentally unfriendly chemicals. But it would be interesting to see that after the enzyme process and how robustly that fibre stands up to wear and washing. But yeah, they are reporting that you can put the fibre in the washing machine. It won't take dye quite as well, but it will go in the washing machine and isn't considered superwash because it's not been through the harsh acid process, and it's microplastic free. So I might give it a go. But yeah, thank you for listening. Well, I basically talk to myself in proper fleece.